God puts us in nations, in places, not by mistake, but to do a job. What if we opened our eyes to the needs of our colleagues, of our leaders, of our subordinates, and we were a priest on their behalf? Welcome to the Repurposing Business Podcast. My name is Brett Johnson.
And I'm Lynn Johnson.
And we're going to be talking about how to get our business into God's business. Our subtext is Let My Business Go, and we'll have guests from around the world. So thank you for joining us this week and every week on the Repurposing Business Podcast. Well, welcome to the Repurposing Business Podcast. We have today a wonderful group of people. We have some of the executives from LivFul, and we have Michael, John, and Matt, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. And Michael, since you're at the top of the screen, why don't we start with you?
Great. Yeah, thank you, Brett. So my name is Michael Norman. I'm the CEO of LivFul. So my role, obviously, as CEO is shepherding and driving strategy and resource creation for the company. My background is as a lawyer for many years in a corporate practice, but I had an itch to be an entrepreneur, and so got out of that fairly quickly. I didn't practice long until I moved into the entrepreneurial world, and also had a good friend who's been active in the faith and business movement who was speaking into my ear about how does my faith and my business align, and talking against this idea of a secular sacred divide. And this was about 15 or 18 years ago. And so my journey has been really, how do you align those things in my life and in my work since then, and was able to move into the startup world about 10, 12 years ago. And that journey has brought me into LivFul over the past 3 or 4 years. And still am a lawyer by training, but very much a business person by heart, and glad to not be an attorney anymore. But
a recovered lawyer, is that what I'm hearing?
That's
now?
right.
Great.
Exactly.
And what exactly does LivFul do?
So LivFul is a startup that was founded by Hogan Bassi and a few others that has developed a novel insect repellent that is long-lasting. It's nice to use, and has the opportunity to move from a commoditized nuisance abatement product into being something that can have application to prevent disease in people's lives. Through mosquito-borne malaria, dengue fever, various diseases that are caused by or carried by mosquitoes. Hogan's got a great background story and calling into that product. And so we have that product on the market. We've also been able to expand our remit, in a sense, beyond just one product into looking at ways that you can use products to prevent infection, and to prevent infection throughout the whole economic pyramid of people in the world, rather than a more traditional life science approach, which is really driven to creating products that serve the needs of the top of the pyramid. Mm-hmm. And so deep within LivFul is a calling to change that. So we're doing that on a small scale with the first product, and we're slowly expanding that into other products and opportunities that are really synergistic with the repellent at this point. But our vision is really turning upside down this broken life science world that really isn't interested in how do you meet the needs and design for the needs of the poor or the global middle class, and really driven by the dollars that can be driven in the developed world and the upper income world.
So I can assure you I'm still doing a product testing up here in Signal Mountain. So this weekend I had LivFul in all the places I could get it, but I have a patch on my back I couldn't reach, and I had 5 bites in that patch. So I need
it's always good to have a control.
Yeah.
Good control patch.
Yeah, control patch. Yeah. So
Right.
now I need LivFul to come with somebody who will put it on my back. That's the only thing. So I'm trying to persuade Lynn about that.
I think that's Lynn's job, not ours.
That's right. Yeah. And John, how about you?
Well, I'm based in Liverpool. I'm the Chief Operations Officer and responsible for the architecture and creating the infrastructure to deliver what we say we're doing and making sure that we do it in a repeatable and controllable way.
Yeah.
And we're building from virtually a blank sheet of paper, which has been fun. We've worked very collaboratively. The culture within our company is collaboration and really a great team environment, solving problems and facing new issues. And we've kind of moved from one plateau of success and implementation to the next. It's been really good progress over the last 4 years.
Fantastic.
And so that's what I'm responsible for, based in Liverpool, as I said. And we're aiming to provide our global support from the UK so that we can address all time zones in an effective way and have international access. So a real start of operations in Atlanta, and then now we've got a bridge into other parts of the world. So we're building operations in all continents right now. So we're still small. So one person in a continent is our start.
It all starts somewhere. And I see you've got the right picture of the world map behind you with Africa in the center.
Yeah, well, my heart is in Africa. I was born in Africa, and you and I met on African soil. So, yeah. And, you know, just thinking about our journey as LivFul, I became a Christian when I was 15. And the very first thing I did as a Christian that I can remember is open my Bible and start to read. And the very first question that I started to ask myself as I explored the scriptures was, what is church? I soon realized that it wasn't mentioned anywhere in the Bible until Jesus got talking. And then I started to ask, well, where did that suddenly come from? I mean, who suddenly mentions this new thing in the middle of what they're talking about? And that really led me to a lifelong journey of answering that question. What is the church? And a personal commitment to the idea that our whole life and this job is my expression and ministry of being the church.
Fantastic. That's great. The Bishop of Liverpool. We like it. Good. And Matt, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Name's Matt Ellsbury. I'm the president and chief strategy officer of LivFul, and involved in a number of things, as most of us in the startup world are. But the main thing is responsible for our global operations and our efforts in various continents around the world, trying to expand this idea of how the business and the kingdom of God would collaborate together. And so we're, I like Michael, started my journey probably around 18 to 20 years ago, working for a nonprofit that was focused on how the kingdom of God and money should be interacting, and Crown Financial Ministries, a number of years. And while there, basically started kind of questioning the core premise, which said, I wasn't questioning, I was questioning the ramifications of the core premise. And the core premise of Crown is that God owns everything, and that we're simply stewards or managers of whatever he entrusts to us. And the ramification was, well, if that's true, then why are the dividing lines between for-profit and nonprofit so distinct in our world? And why do so many people have two-pocket thinking, where they invest and spend and consume out of one pocket and then give to the kingdom, quote unquote, kingdom of God out of the other pocket? And just believed with all my heart that there probably shouldn't be that distinction. And saw an opportunity to try to build companies that investment into would be every bit as holy, every bit as kingdom building, with purpose or intention as a donation to a church or a nonprofit would be, and really questioning why we need these distinctions, and actually if the whole kind of structure that we've put in place is just reinforcing this idea that the kingdom of God can really be best and more fully explained or experienced or built through these quote unquote sanctioned nonprofit church and the like opportunities versus everything else. And and obviously just trying to think logically about the kingdom, it didn't seem like that made sense. And so I literally set off from my home country, the US, and moved to Indonesia with my wife, Rocio, and decided to explore that with a number of companies in Indonesia, and working with a few publicly listed companies as well as a bunch of privately held ones as well, and asking the question, could we operate on kingdom principles, which obviously the companies weren't Christian explicitly, and so what would kingdom principles be able to benefit long-term profitability for the shareholders, but also real engagement with our communities and our employees and stakeholders. So did that for a bit, and then I got a phone call from a mentor back in the US saying that there's this young Nigerian kid that I have to meet and talk to. So I was introduced to Hogan back in 2013 and started advising him and what is now LivFul back then. And when I left Indonesia, I had a couple things happen. One, I had was trying to help the church see the importance of this, blurring the line between business and the kingdom of God. And unfortunately, that was a little bit like bumping my head against a brick wall. And so God pretty clearly said, go build the type of company that you want to model it for them, so that people can see it and understand it. And the second thing that happened was a dear friend of my wife and I's actually passed away from malaria in Ethiopia, having contracted it. Her and her husband contracted it in Ghana, and he was very sick in Ghana. She had gone on ahead to Ethiopia, where she passed away, and he almost passed away. And that process, God really used to say, this is something I care about, and what you experience in the loss of your friend. There's 1 million people every year that die from some sort of insect-borne disease, whether it's carried by ticks or mosquitoes or flies. That I care about just as much as you care about your friend, and they have friends and family that care about them just as much as you care about your friend. And basically, it was a pretty strong nudge invitation to jump in with Hogan full time and start to build that type of company that seeks to solve this major global challenge, but also to blur the line between business and the kingdom of God, so that church can really be, I think, the full intent that God had for it, which is to be disciple makers of people in every aspect of society that seeks to bring the kingdom to wherever they're planted, not just to kind of do kingdom and church and ministry activities within the walls of the church, but to really be seeds planted, wherever they are, to bring restoration to society. So,
right, fantastic. And that's a great segue to our topic for today, which is because you got into this, Matt, because you cared about an individual, and God impressed that upon you. And there are plenty of people who get into business. One of our guys who's just been through some of our training is a serial entrepreneur, and he's joined an incubator in New York. He has no idea what the business is. They'll figure it out as they go. But in your case, you're driven by something really that God cares about, and which He's caused you to care about through a set of circumstances. So that's what I'd love to unpack with you guys is, how do you build a business, or do you build a business to address needs that God cares about versus just do any business or do a business that works? Because business is a good thing, and business is ministry. We understand that, and work is good, and generating, creating wealth is good. Those are all good things. So the activities of business in and of themselves, we agree, those things are good. So going beyond that, though, to tackling a business, coming up with something that addresses the need that God really cares about. How do you guys filter that and determine where you're going to focus so that you're doing things that are on the heart of God versus, yeah, this could be a good business? John, how about you?
Well, it's a great question. I don't think there's a single slam dunk answer to it. I was 47 years old and I got contacted by this guy in Texas with the proposition of getting involved in developing a test for tuberculosis. But at that point, I honestly probably had never written the word tuberculosis down. I had no need to.
So you hadn't started smoking yet?
I hadn't, and I didn't know how to spell. I didn't know how to spell the disease. Never mind understand the pathogens and all that we needed to think about.
Yeah.
And I just thought, no, you're kidding. You know, I've got lots of ambition, but I don't need to learn a whole new science when I'm 47. Mm-hmm. And God has a sense of humor, because at the same time I got introduced to an amazing man of God who had started a ministry at 52, which had gone global, a man called Dennis Wrigley, who founded Maranatha Ministries here in the UK, the Maranatha community, rather. And he gave me a whole new perspective. You know, he started at age 52, and here I was being mentored by him in his late 70s, and he never did less than a 17-hour day. And I started to think, well, maybe I have a different perspective. And so the answer to your question is sometimes God just pushes you into things and you realize, oh, this is actually God. And, you know, as holy and prayerful as we can claim to be, sometimes it is a sovereign hand of God that puts something in front of you that says, this is the thing for you. Mm-hmm. And so that developed, and Michael was that Texan entrepreneur, and we worked together for the best part of 10 years on that project. And that really, again, answering your question, stirred up a lot of things that I wasn't aware of. And I think collectively, our small team of 3 were not aware of until we started looking into it. You know, how are people dying of tuberculosis? Why? And it isn't just there isn't good treatment, because there is good treatment. And it isn't just because there isn't a diagnostic, because there is a diagnostic. But there are systemic problems and cultural problems and vested interests and climate issues and all sorts of stuff that we became aware of and started to realize global health is really a problem. And if we want to do something meaningful in this life, global health is a really important area to work in. Not the only area, but that's where we were drawn. And that kind of set a reference point. Okay, so here's what we believe about the world and God's call on our lives, and here's some needs. Are we competent to start addressing that? And to be honest, in 2009, I would say no, I wasn't competent to even
close.
Talk about
you or me.
Yeah, so, but then, you know, I remember Michael saying to me some couple of years later, you know, we talk to these people who've got PhDs and they've studied this science and they are the acclaimed experts. What they speak is the truth about the science. But do you realize that after 4 years of studying and talking and going to seminars and reading papers, we're now not that far behind these people? And actually, that really comes back to what we've all had preached at us many times on a Sunday, that through God you can do all things, you know, so stop limiting yourself. So I don't claim I'm as good as a PhD guy and don't understand the science even as well as Michael does, but I do realize that you can do more than you think you can. And God wants us to make a difference, not just earn a living, pay a mortgage, and enjoy material things, but to make a difference as we go along. So then it opens up into a much longer answer to your question of weighing things up. And actually, final comment on this, sometimes when things go horribly wrong and it all comes crunching to a nothing, it is still when God confirms in it, yeah, well, this is what I wanted you to do. Yeah, I didn't promise you it would work out like your graph said it would. I just wanted you to do what I'm telling you to do. And Michael and I had some wonderful moments where it didn't work out like we wanted it to.
Yeah.
Smashingly bad.
Yeah, so Michael, it sounds like, between the two of you, leaving Matt aside for the moment, you've had over 20 years of school fees that the two of you have been paying as you've worked in this thing. And it's interesting how God sometimes, a decade for God is not a big deal if he's prepping us to go after something that's on his heart. Would you agree with that?
I do, yeah. And I think we see the next 3 months. What's going to happen in 3 months? Not realizing that the story is a 10-year prep, right? Yeah. 10-year schooling, 12-year schooling. And so we sit today looking back on that 12 years thinking, man, it was hard in the moments, but we're so prepared for this next phase of our journey. And we've been, John and I, and Matt would say too, I think, and Hogan, the LivFul team in general would be able to say, that there's a journey that's unfolded over the last 10 to 20 years. And so my feeling of how or why are we situated now to pursue the things God.
I think Michael's frozen for a moment.
I took a step, and then the second step, and then the 10th step.
Yeah. We missed 10 seconds of what you said, Michael.
Okay.
A vital 10 seconds. Everything on what you just said.
Okay. Let me step back then.
How are we?
We're prepared because of obedience to a calling, a sense of calling that we couldn't have expressed 12 years ago,
right,
in real detail, but we're obedient to nonetheless. And so that being very explicitly about pursuing what God cares about and feeling like health and injustice in health and broken systems in pharmaceutical life science, we could put a lot more language to it today than I could 12 years ago. But at the core was there's broken things and we're somehow going to go be a part of fixing that.
Yeah.
And so we have the benefit of naivete 12 years ago and launching out and seeing God move us along a journey of ever increasing faith building experience. And it wasn't at all up and to the right. It was this, and ultimately the first venture failed, and from a commercial sense.
Yeah.
So we sit today very attuned to that calling, drawing us into this big narrative that COVID has just exploded on the world in an unbelievable way. And just within LivFul, feeling like that's not surprising, because to solve the problems that were in my gut 12 years ago takes shaking structures and changing the positions of authority. And so we feel like we've had a 10 to 12 year education to be prepared for now in a really extraordinary way that I wouldn't trade. And thankfully, I'm still married and I've gotten kids into college and all of that along the way. There were very difficult moments within that where we weren't sure what we were going to do, pay bills. You don't suspend the normal entrepreneurial journey just because you're called.
Right.
And so the business itself has to be viable. The processes have to be real, and I think we can have an implicit expectation that, well, if God is in this, somehow it's going to work out. And you still have to do business well. You still have to do the things that ensure your product does what it says it does. And so we're marrying all of that, but it's marinated in this deep sense of calling.
Mm-hmm. And I presume you've got a huge, you've got a huge opportunity now where your job of convincing people that systemic change is needed in healthcare has just been made a lot easier, right? I mean, every day on the news, I was just watching a doctor not that long ago out of a New York hospital, I think it was, just saying, us doctors have to take control of what we're allowed to do with patients again. The system has to change. Once the war is over, or once this battle is over, we need to go back and fix systems. We can't just have health insurance companies dictating what you do and don't do, and big pharma and so on. So some of that has certainly been shaken up. And I would imagine, though, there's a window of opportunity, right? Because they will all try to convince us to go back to business as usual. And that's not what you guys want, right? Yeah.
No.
Okay. So one of the things that strikes me is the difference between living in Egypt, where you've got, and in this case, I would say your predictable pharma, healthcare systems, and so on, is almost like living in Egypt, if you like, versus living in the promised land, is that you're in the promised land when you're fighting giants, right? And so you've got battles, you've got difficulties, and so on. So what are some of the big giants that you guys are tackling? Matt, do you want to take a crack at that?
Sure. I think you touched on some of them with your comments a few seconds ago, that just the system as it is. I think
what does that mean?
The largest fundamental system is the way capital works. And there's some specifics that we're getting into in health that we can, and then maybe John and Michael can share more about that. But the capital piece is the fundamental question. I mean, right now, if you look at how, there's so many people get into pharmacology, and big pharma is become almost a swear word, but the people who are working for these companies get into it because they want to help and they want to bring health solutions to the world. And yet the way to do that fully and more robustly is to be thrust into a system where the jobs are, and the jobs are with these large corporations that have are only allowed, they have a narrow bandwidth, an Overton window, if you will, of things that are acceptable that they can do, because they're accountable to their shareholders, and their shareholders demand good return on investment, as the system is designed to reinforce. And so some of the best and biggest companies in the world are all making between, I could list them for you, I won't on this podcast, but are making between 67% and 80% profit margin on their solutions. And if they have, so it's good business. It's cash rich, it's return rich, but it doesn't have the ability to be very flexible. Because if you have a great, brilliant solution that you can bring to the world and make what many businesses would consider a good return of 50 or 60% or even 70% in some of these companies' cases, you just can't do it. You're hamstrung to that effect, because your investors will fire you as a management team if you keep taking on projects that are lowering your gross profit margin, which is almost directly attributed to your share price. And so you literally do not have, as management of these companies, you don't have the flexibility and the freedom to do what you want. And so I think the biggest, or to do what you maybe feel called in your heart to do, et cetera, the system just kind of blocks that. And it's not necessarily the evil big pharma company in the background pushing the wrong buttons and playing with people's lives. It's the system we've constructed that is constrained. And that says that when you have capital from people, and when people, it's really anybody with a 401k that's invested in these companies that are demanding, that their financial advisors bring a healthy return, and their financial advisors are putting pressure on the entities. So it's a system that is reinforced this way, unfortunately. And so I think the way we're tackling that is by taking a different view of capital, and that we will not take capital that's not aligned with this impact focus vision that sees innovation and impact as a higher priority than the maximization of profit. And that's stated in our prioritization statement and our vision. We see our role as a company to bring a different source of capital with a different belief about what that capital can and can be and accomplish in the world. And we think that tackling it this way will just make so many things possible that ultimately our holders of capital will that invest in us will win over time because of our model. So that's not less profitable. It's just with the right time horizon and the right perspective.
So, Michael, as the CEO, have you had to convince your investors of having a different scorecard, and how have you done that, if you have?
We've been fortunate to have a great story that, in its essence, Hogan's story captures a lot of these narratives and resonates with people, especially believers who want, have a yearning for impact and making a difference. And so I think in the early stages of the company, we've been able to tell that story and attract the capital we need to get going. But as our aspirations are growing and the dollars that we need are getting larger and larger, where we found ourselves is needing to mature that narrative and to really start to bring the pieces of the puzzle all together to express really why that's possible, and to be able to sort of move people in their thinking from a venture sort of exit type mentality to seeing, well, how do we think differently about these different types of capital? How do I understand the value of impact? And can it be currencyatized? That's not a word. Monetized, in some way. And the great news is people like you, Brett, are writing and producing on this. People like Bruno Roche and other groups are recognizing more and more that there's this disconnect. And so we're the beneficiary of it's not just our ideas. We're able to grab tools and language and express it so that people are, it's not just our story, but rather this is a movement. This is a narrative that's globally gaining traction. And then COVID has blown it up, right? I mean, that's the narrative. We're starting to put our fundraising materials together for our next round, and then COVID happened, and we've had to come back, and the underlying message isn't different, but COVID has changed everything. Everybody got a crash course in the brokenness, the interconnectedness, the fragility of our systems, unbelievably prescient for our message. And so we've had to come back and sort of, now what we're talking about in a much more visceral way. We recognize that, and here's how we're going forward. So it'll be interesting. We should be starting to fundraise again in the next month or so, and that'll be we think that narrative will resonate much more strongly based on the past 3 or 4 months of people's living.
Great. So in some ways, LivFul 2.0 is going to become a safe haven for people who have been told by the system, you're not viable, your solution is too cheap, it's too homespun, or it's not scalable enough, or the margins won't be big enough, and you'll become a mecca for people who are sitting there with these creative ideas and solutions. And it's going to take, is that part of what you see in the future?
Yeah, we've recognized, so part of where we have had traction is working in countries in unique ways. So in life science, you typically have a channel, which would be, a pharmaceutical distribution channel, pharmacy chains, grocery stores, so the product type gets distributed into that retail channel. And that's a very expensive way to distribute something. And so while we are pursuing those avenues where we've seen traction and also leading to impact, to changing people's lives, is being more creative about social entrepreneur driven networks, and moving past those traditional channels into more people driven channels, and seeking to not be top down in our philosophy of reaching the customer, but rather bottom up. And so where we placed our priority is seeking those kinds of opportunities, products that can fit into that, in the informal market channels that exist in Africa or Southeast Asia, that are a massive part of commerce, but aren't the typical life science channel that you would pursue. And so we hope to build a portfolio of products that really improve people's lives, but are suitable for that, that full pyramid approach. And there are constraints in that. There's regulatory constraints. There's a reason why pharmaceutical margins are so big, because they do invest a lot of money in research and development. It's just that it's aimed at finding that next product that can fit the Western insurance-driven or government-driven model, and that's just only a small portion of the world's population.
So you're not doing the killer app idea. You're saying, okay, we'd rather have 100 less than killer apps, but that employ a lot of people in the food chain and also solve real problems. Yeah. So John, in your thinking, as you're sitting and you're thinking, okay, how does this all come together? And somebody comes to you and says, I've got a great idea. I've got a product that will solve whatever the problem might be. And you're filtering that person to see if they live within a LivFul world. What kind of process do you go through? Because our question is, do they care about stuff or not, right? That's part of your question. So how do you go through that process?
It's a great question. It's actually something we're working on right now to get better at that. And the first answer is, it's not just one person with a decision checklist, but really looking as a team and a wider network of how does this fit, and involving lots of people in the decision process, so that we're intelligently filtering not just, is this a product that's going to sell and make money, but how does this benefit people's lives? And for example, Hogan's had conversations with people along this line, having learned what he learned, because he started as a 10-year-old saying, I want to change people's lives. I want to stop people getting malaria. So he saw the need and then embarked on a career. And I've watched him have conversations with people who've got a great idea, and even the inventor is thinking, oh, here's a product. And Hogan's saying, now what's the real need you're meeting here? And then going back to that and saying, right, well, doesn't that fit? So we were talking with a guy who's invented a new way of making face masks. You would think that's about as commoditized a product as there could be. But this guy has really gone back to, well, what's the real need here to protect people, both the wearer and not the wearer? And what good would that do in society? So our process is really thinking about, well, how would this benefit the producer? How would it benefit the user? And just think about repellent for a second. That's our sort of core starting product. If someone in Africa, in a mosquito-infested region, has a real repellent that works, not only is it a product that they want to buy for their family, but then they're freed from the pain and discomfort and sickness to be more economically productive and socially active and creative. So the product becomes the launching pad for them to then be part of our chain. And so we see those people as not just purchasers of our product, but maybe ideas people. So we want them to understand the values that drove our product, because those values might inspire them to say, well, here's an idea from what I see of the need here to do this, whether it's to do with solar power or online education or other things, not just more consumer packaged goods. But everywhere in the world, people are thinking of ideas to meet needs, aren't they? So we don't have a simple sausage machine that says, right, put your idea in here, this metric, this value, this. Maybe we do need to get more systematic at it, but it's very much a collective. Okay, what's the science? What's the regulation? What's the real need here? And do these people fit with our vision? Because we want to promote that holistic thing. And I think the secularization of society and the commercialism of the industrial world has really pushed people into categories and not holistic. You know, you aren't just a purchaser of shampoo. You're an inventor and a user and a family person, and you have your network. So you can be part of our filter.
Yeah. And supporting people who have this kind of ethos is really, really, really important. I don't know if you've seen an interview with the president of Madagascar trying to explain why their solution to COVID, which is home-based, in other words, it's based on their culture, it's based on the products that they create there. And he is getting so much flack from the World Health Organization, from the pharmaceutical companies, etc. And he is saying, but we've had no deaths. And the people have recovered and they're out of the hospital. I don't get what your problem is. And that's right. Kind of, yeah. So we'll have to get you introduced to him so you can recruit him. You know, he could be a good guy. But it's a classic interview. I mean, it's in French, but translated. And, you know.
Well, Brett, I thoroughly enjoyed my 7 days on the Rep intensive course with you and Lynn in Cape Town. And at that, I met 3 people from Madagascar, which gave me a desire to go there. So maybe that's a sign. Michael, I should be sent to Madagascar for this COVID.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's it's one of these. Yeah, I think it's seriously we're going to have to make a trip because I think it's those kind of environments where they would say, okay, we have 25 million people. We have an infant mortality rate of 50% by the time they reach 5 years old, and yet we've got some local ingredients. We've got nutraceuticals. We've got other products and so on. And I think in sometimes those could become your development labs for some of the future things that would become part of the portfolio. And providing support for people to tell them you're not crazy and you're not on your own sounds like that's an important role.
And we talk about this as an ecosystem of ideas and people and needs. And, you know, Michael and I and Matt just came off a phone call where someone was talking about developing world diarrhea situation. And the answer might not be a big pharma expensive new product, might be an intelligent consideration of what the human gut needs. And really, it sounds like that's what they're doing in Madagascar with COVID. You know, here's something that works. Oh, disappointing news for the pharma companies. It doesn't make them any money.
Correct.
But the goal here is for people to live full.
Yeah. Excellent. Great. Well, your biggest hopes coming out of this current crisis, what would they be? In a sentence each, what would you, just to tee it up? Okay, Michael, you get to go first.
Biggest hope. Well, we have big dreams about what we can become, and the COVID crisis has forced us to accelerate forward. So, you know, my dream is that we see real fruit in the next 6 months of that acceleration. That just confirms that the prep we did over the last years that we said was the future we just got shoved off the cliff, and we get to fly in the next 6 months as we see those things that we believed were possible happen in terms of new products launching, traction with relationships and all of that, which obviously feeds the fundraising cycle and gives us a strong base to keep going.
Great. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, for me, it's, I think what we've really learned with COVID has probably been true all along, but it's been highlighted this way, especially for those of us in the West, or in, I should say, countries that are doing well economically, is that we're really only as healthy as our least healthy neighbor. And I think in a global society, we're learning more and more that our neighbor is anybody in the globe as people travel around the world. So understanding the needs and the importance of healthcare in our own communities, that if we're not taking care of those with COVID, they're likely to spread it, whether they're here in a poorer community in the U.S. or in an underserved community around the world. We're only as healthy as our least healthy neighbor. So if we can think about that, and obviously use some pressure, use that to put some pressure on the existing systems of the world that don't exactly contemplate out of the box solutions, like you mentioned in Madagascar or other places, and allow innovation into the healthcare arena in ways that it's really never been done before.
Excellent. John?
Well, I'm not going to disagree with our CEO and with Matt. I'm excited because I think a lot of institutional assumptions are being broken down and challenged, which creates opportunity in itself for truth. And I look forward to LivFul and the message that we're carrying, gaining great influence and encouraging people.
Great. So
I'll just add, Brett, one more thing.
Yeah.
We're not a Christian company. We hire the right people that ascribe to our values and our vision, and we've gotten a tremendous staff. And I think that this is so winsome to people. Like, this is what people want to be a part of. And we've seen it over and over. And we're not a big company yet and not a big staff, but we just see people being attracted to wanting to be a part of changing the world, being a part of a missional driven company. And it's not about evangelism, but giving an avenue for people to be who they are made to be and express who they're calling, whether that's related to Christianity or not. It's like how we're made to be as people, and that being a basis for influence and a basis for changing dynamics is very exciting to us.
Yeah, a friend in South Africa, a theologian guy, spent 7 years doing a theology of work thing, said that he believes discipleship is teaching people to work the way that God designed them to work in the first place. And you can do that with anybody. You can do that with somebody who's an agnostic or a Hindu or a Muslim, or who is a follower of Jesus. So you can do that through your work with anybody, which is fantastic. I've got good news for you, gentlemen. John, you talked about being, your friend who started something at 52, and I was just reading recently with Moses and Aaron, their collective age was 163, and you guys, I don't think you're even close, the three of you. And God has no problem, getting us on this startup or this restart journey. And I think in your case, he seems to have flushed some of the giants out of the bushes, so you can get a clearer shot at them. And hopefully funders will be getting behind you in a big way so that you guys have all the ammunition that you need. And it's great to take down a giant with one stone, but you've got many things that you're going after. So I trust that the right capital will be attracted to you, the additional people that you need, that the countries will open up in the right sequence, and that many more will become part of your ecosystem as you tackle things that God cares about. So thank you so much for joining me today. Greatly appreciate it. It's been fun to get to know you, John. It was great having you in Cape Town. Don't tell the other guys how great it is. We only have limited space, No, we're looking forward to that.
Right.
And so I appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you for taking the time. And I've certainly enjoyed getting to know you and your passions and your visions and your dreams. And I'm excited to be chatting with three men who have big dreams for the future. The COVID crisis, as you can see, has not shrunk your thinking, but has really just opened up so many possibilities. So I'm excited to have had you with me today. Greatly appreciate it. And until we have our next conversation, bless you guys.